Thank you all for joining. I'm going to be chatting about being neurodivergent and non-technical and how that fits really well into working in data and working in tech. So a bit about me to begin with. My name's Izzy. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the marketing executive at Advancing Analytics. I have over 3 years of marketing experience within the data and AI world. I'm non-binary, non-technical, and neurodivergent. The latter two are obviously the topic of today. Importantly, I am also not a doctor. Please don't take this as medical advice. It is just anecdotal to support neurodivergent people in the workplace. So the past few years, there has been a boom of individuals realizing that they're neurodivergent. In particular, that they have autism or ADHD, and I myself am part of that boom. There's lots of reasons for this, but one of the biggest is the pandemic. So the shift to working from home, combined with the upheaval of routine and the decrease of dopamine-inducing activities like seeing your friends, has led many people to having a kind of light bulb moment. I've just popped the ADHD iceberg on there. There's many to choose from, but just to sort of like give you an idea of what it looks like. So my journey begins in 2020. I was finishing my degree in film and English lit, which, as you may notice, isn't marketing. I wanted to work in TV. I wanted to work as a runner or on location or maybe working my way up to camera work. I got 1 IMDb credit before COVID hit. So with no idea how long the pandemic was going to go on for or how long it was going to affect my job prospects, I realized that I needed to figure out how I was going to use my skill set. And particularly because the hospitality world had completely come to a standstill. So I fell into marketing and consequently kind of fell into data consulting. I'm hugely grateful for my first workplace for kind of taking a chance on me as someone with no marketing qualifications. And then after a couple of years, I moved to my current position. I was really upfront with wanting to work in TV with them, and they were absolutely willing to support that. And to the point of me saying, I don't want to work a 9 to 5. And they were like, okay, well, you're kind of going to have to do something similar. But after about 6 months of working here, I realized that I didn't actually want to work in TV anymore because it worked so well with my brain. So onto the focus, being non-technical and neurodivergent. I'm going to focus on ADHD as it's my personal experience, but I am just going to point out the phrase of when you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person. I'm not going to be the same as the next neurodivergent person, in particular with neurodivergencies being so expansive, not only within ADHD, but also throughout autism and dyslexia and dyspraxia and all of the other neurodivergencies. So with ADHD, there are many ways that it shows up in my working life. I have combined ADHD, so I have the inattentive and the hyperactive side. So the inattentive side is largely executive dysfunction for me. So this is the inability to perform executive functions. This looks like forgetting to eat, forgetting to go to the bathroom, and procrastinating, which actually isn't procrastinating. It's something called ADHD paralysis. So personally for me, this looks like listening to music and daydreaming or sitting on my phone and doom scrolling. And it looks to an outsider like you're just being lazy, but it's really, really hard to break out of that cycle. It takes so much mental strength to just break out of it. So some of the hacks I'm going to be looking at are going to address that. And then the sort of more hyperactive side, I refer to as the toddler in my brain analogy. So this is pretty much what it feels like, how busy my brain is. I need to keep the toddler fed and happy and distracted in order for me to be able to do my work. If any of those things aren't true, my brain is going to be far too busy for me to be able to focus. So I'm going to structure this by going through the INCUP acronym, which was developed by a psychologist to describe the 5 ways that an adult with ADHD can stay motivated. So these are interest, novelty, challenge, urgency, and passion. It's not perfect, and a lot of them do overlap. For example, interest and passion are very closely related, but we'll get into that. So beginning with interest. Many neurotypical people have an importance-based nervous system. So this basically means that if a task is important, that is enough for them to go, oh, I want to do this task. This is enough motivation. It is important. For many neurodivergent people, we don't have that. We have an interest-based nervous system. We need the interest. The importance isn't enough of a motivator. So one way to create more interest is to distract the toddler. So I need half of my brain to be focused on something else or distracted, so the other half can focus on whatever I'm doing. This usually looks for me as music. I listen to music literally 24/7, and it helps distract half my brain so the other half can focus. Watching a TV show or a film that you've watched before as like a comfort show is also a really good technique. Dual tasking is another one. This ties into distracting the toddler if you're doing multiple things at once. But in particular, I will focus on 2 different tasks at work at once, which I know sounds kind of insane. But I will have 2 monitors, and I will have an admin task on one, and I'll have something deeper and more problem solving on the other. And together, they kind of, if I'm focused on one, if I'm doing the admin task, half my brain is figuring out the problem. If I'm doing the problem, I know that I've got the admin task to go back to if I ever get stuck. And it works really well being non-technical in this because with interest, you kind of need there to be constant learning. So in marketing, I need to stay on top of marketing trends as well as on top of the tech itself. And as someone without a technical background, but thankfully really loves learning, it's worked out very nicely. So on to novelty. People with ADHD are drawn to nice, new, shiny things. We are like little magpies. So when something starts to lose its shine, we then struggle with our motivation. Statistically, people with ADHD struggle to hold down a job because the novelty wears off, and that means that we're less motivated at work, and that means that we struggle. We're also very impulsive people. Our brains have physical lower levels of dopamine, so we are hunting effectively for our next dopamine hit. This impulsivity and this drive for newness and that drive for novelty, but that can be harnessed into something good. So changing up your routine is a really good technique for me. I will go to a coffee shop and I will be 10 times more productive than I was at my desk. I will even move from my desk to my sofa, which is literally 2 steps away, but somehow that change just provides enough novelty for me to be able to focus again. And there's a bit of a crossover with interest here, but bouncing between tasks is a good one. So this varies between neurodivergent people. Autistic people might find this context switching really difficult, so it's not going to work for them. But it works really well for me because each time that I bounce, I get a new sense of novelty, a new sense of newness. Being in marketing, and particularly as a one-person team, every day is different. So I get this sense of newness and sense of novelty every day. And marketing itself is very fast-paced, which also plays into that novelty really nicely. So moving on to challenge. The ADHD brain is easily bored. That's harder to say than I thought. Even if the work isn't boring, our brains are wired differently, so some things just won't hold our attention in the same way that it will a neurotypical person's. So even if I enjoy what I'm doing, which I do, I need to be challenged in order to feel a sense of fulfillment. So this is kind of more of a long-term brain hack, but consistent goal setting and reflection is really important. Being able to check in with my manager and seeing if I'm hitting the goals works really well, and it also means that I can adjust the sort of level of challenge. I can be more challenged if I need it. If something's too hard and that is then making it harder for me, we can bring it down a little bit more. And then the second challenge-based hack is gamifying everything. This is one of my favorite things. It's different for everyone, but I found that reward systems and beat the time systems work really well. So for example, this isn't work related, but I despise washing my dishes. It is my least favorite chore in the world. So I will race against the clock, and I will set up a timer and I will try and beat my previous time. So every time I'm washing the dishes, I'm competing. I'm a very competitive person, if you hadn't guessed, and it works really well. Similarly, where I work, we have a sort of competitive team building. What would you like? Competitive team building, ongoing thing, goes on for months. We all compete. It's great fun, but it means that it's kind of incentivizes people, and it gets a sense of camaraderie and a sense of we're all doing this together. And that gamifying thing really helps bring the challenge. So urgency is the one that's had the biggest impact for me. ADHDers tend to leave things until the last minute. This is because at the last minute you get a rush of adrenaline, and adrenaline basically equals dopamine. So if there's no last minute, if there's no deadline, it just won't get done, and the task will just be put off. So I need a sense of urgency. I need that sense of pressure in order to get a task done to a good level. So unsurprisingly, setting deadlines is a really good one here, and not necessarily long-term ones, but short ones as well. This is especially good when someone's holding me accountable. But for a short deadline, for example, if I give myself 10 minutes, traditional timer sounds don't work for me. The usual ones that you got on your phone, they just bypass my brain entirely. So what I do is I will set up an absolutely ridiculous song as a timer, and it jolts me out of what I'm doing. In a similar way, I will queue up songs, because I listen to music all the time, and will queue up the songs to be the length of time that I need, and then end it with that ridiculous song. This has resulted in me rickrolling myself multiple times, but it's very effective. So body doubling is the second brain hack for urgency, and this is something that I use daily. It can be physical, whether you're sat in a room with someone, or virtual. And it's basically where you are just existing with someone else. They don't necessarily need to be doing work. They don't even necessarily need to be aware that they are body doubling you. For example, if I go and work in a coffee shop, I get a sense of body doubling because I'm surrounded by people. But having people around me, or even just someone, gives me a sense of pressure, and it's that pressure that I need in order to get stuff done. So we have a virtual office. We're a remote-first company. And me and my friends will sit in this co-working space in our virtual office all day, and we'll get loads done because we're just sat working together, but it's great. If this is a bit inaccessible for you, the sort of best equivalent I found is filming yourself, so setting your phone up on time-lapse. Not only does this stop you reaching from your phone, but it also gives you something to look back on, and you can watch yourself like a little minion working away, and it's really satisfying. Passion is a tricky one, I found. It tends to be either there or not there. And it tends to exist around really specific things, kind of ebbs and flows. But you can do things to increase it. As I said earlier, there is a big overlap with interest here. So the way that I think about it is interest is kind of what it is that you're thinking about, and passion is the why and the what you're doing about it. So this isn't ADHD specific, but owning a project and having that ownership is something that's helped me massively. It takes into account a lot of the other brain hacks that I've mentioned, things like setting goals and setting deadlines. So it plays off those really nicely. And you also get the satisfaction of finishing something, which is really tricky when you have ADHD, because the sense of novelty that we get from starting something will then wear off. So we find it really hard to finish a project. Like, the amount of hobbies that I've started and then just discarded is ridiculous. But having a project at work and seeing it through to the end gives me a higher level of dopamine than the novelty that I got at the beginning. So it works really well. And hyperfocus is another thing that's worked really well. So this is a result of passion, and it can also be a way to create it. So it's really valuable. Hyperfocus is very similar to ADHD paralysis that I mentioned earlier, in that I might forget to eat or forget to leave my desk at all. I'll just sit at my desk. But the difference here is that I'm working, and I'm so in the zone and in that flow state that even if I go to the bathroom, I'm thinking about work. It's slightly ridiculous. But it works really well. So I time box my days, which is a little side hack that also works very well. And a task that might normally take me 2 or 3 hours will take me an hour or less when I'm in hyperfocus. So it's really satisfying and really amazing when you're in that flow state. And there are ways, fidget, to get into that flow state. So for me, it's something like getting a specific drink or listening to a specific genre of music. So film scores work really well for me. Or having a change of scenery, so going to a coffee shop will trigger that flow state and get me into hyperfocus, which are all also the brain hacks that I mentioned. So they all kind of weave in together, and you can figure out a routine that works really well for you. So that is the INCUP acronym. My sort of main key takeaways are that working with my brain and not against it was an absolute game changer. So understanding what works for me rather than trying to fit into a very neurotypical way of working, it changed everything. ADHD is a disability in the UK and it should be treated as such, and being in a workspace where I can ask my manager for accommodations in a completely non-judgmental environment has absolutely changed it. Like being able to show up at work and say, yeah, I'm really struggling today. I can't focus, I can't sit still, or I can't focus because I'm daydreaming. And being met with compassion and problem solving and, okay, that's fine. What are we going to do about it? Has absolutely changed it. So a very small and slightly cheeky plug to check out our careers page because we are hiring at the moment. And I genuinely think that working here has made ADHD far better in my life. It's the brain hacks and everything have made me sort of be able to understand how understand how my brain works and has led me to be more productive and happier than I've been before. So my favorite brain hacks, unsurprisingly, are gamifying everything. I would highly recommend just setting up a timer, and if you're competitive, seeing if it works. Similarly, deadlines are a really good way of doing this, and also the co-working has worked really well. They might not work for you. That's kind of a given at this point. Every neurodiverse person is different. But I'd encourage you to try them, experiment with other brain hacks. If you are working with someone who's neurodivergent, maybe suggest some if you notice that they're struggling with something. And in terms of resources, there's the ADHD subreddit is really good. You can usually search for what you want on there. And then the two creators on there, Ella Willis and Ellie Middleton, are content creators that spread awareness. They are amazing people. I'd recommend following them on LinkedIn and other social media if you have it. And then finally, there is the feedback slide. This was my first big in-person talk, so I would appreciate any feedback. I think we have time for questions. Cool.
What was the IMDb credit?
The IMDb credit was the film Doolittle that came out a few years ago. It was the one with Robert Downey Jr. in it. I was a location marshal. Okay, thank you very much.